What's up, everybody? So GW has gone and announced the release date for the contrast paints. It's June 15th of 2019, which means the week prior is pre-order week for it as well. And I'm looking forward to getting my hands on some of these paints and experimenting and seeing what's up with it and how I can use them. I would really like to get a nice yellow effect because while there is Elementor's yellow glaze, there's if I can get that a nice yellow crispness for Lamenters with a contrast paint with less work, I'm all about that. So, anyways, um, with that said, they've also announced, which I want to talk about, I shouldn't say announced, launched is a better word, actually, the Citadel Color website. Color is spelled O-U-R. So citadelcolor.com is their painting website. So this is going to be a quick thoughts on the website itself, and then the rest of this is going to be pre-release thoughts on the contrast paint range. What we know about it being basically stated, my thoughts on that, and my one big concern I still have, which ultimately I think isn't a deal breaker. I'm sure it'll work just fine, but because it hasn't been specifically addressed or brought up, it's a concern still. So firstly, the website. Now, I will say this. It's GW's website. They're going to showcase their products. They're going to use it as a glorified advertisement as well for their products. I understand this. I wouldn't expect it to be any other way for any company. But having said that, whether or not you play GW's stuff and use their models, and whether or not you use their paints, you could do neither. This is a nice resource. It's a video library. And you just have to extrapolate if you're using a different paint range on different models, but it's a great resource to have, new or old, depending on if you're a newer or older painter. Resources are always nice. My philosophy is you can never have enough resources. And even though you could find stuff for brush care and transfer applications and masking models and base coating models and the like, you can find plenty of stuff on the internet already on different websites, forums, and YouTube channels. This is yet another resource at your disposal, which is only a good thing. And it's not badly done. There's a full video library that is small right now because the web page just started, but they have stated they're going to be adding to it, and they have some lofty goals. So hopefully they will do their best to meet them and give us a lot of really cool videos. But I think it's definitely a nice repository of resource, regardless of whether or not you use their models or their paints. They have a few contrast paint videos already on there, including a glaze one, where you thin it down and put it over not one of their base colors. They put it over a granite silver armor to give it that blue hue to their armor. They do it with a contrast paint, which is very interesting, and further showcases how you can use it beyond its normal intention, as they made mention you could. But anyways, it's just cool to see those videos already with the contrast paints not being out, because for getting into the contrast paints, I will say they are a different formulation of paint than what GW offers and what a lot of companies offer. So you want to make sure the consumer knows how to use it properly, because the last thing you want is negative feedback because it's being used incorrectly. Negative feedback, but from a user that's doing it correctly, giving you constructive negative criticism, which may be a bit redundant to say, but is, I say welcomed if you're a properly functioning company, right? But the last thing you want is somebody just giving you this negative criticism because they're not using it right. It doesn't help anything. So I understand why they've been going over a lot of how to use the contrast paints and why they have some videos on it already. With that said, however, I've had no first-hand experience with these paints. I've just seen some pictures on the interwebs, and I'm honestly intrigued and looking forward to its release. Specifically, I'm looking forward to yellow, orange, bone, and then some other random colors, green, black, white, all of them. But specifically, I only get a couple to start off with to experiment. But yeah, a cool range of paints that we know already, or knew when they were first announced, that they were going to go over a specifically formulated undercoat for contrast. What that meant at the time, we didn't know, but we know now because of the Meet the Range posting. It's just two different base coats that we knew were coming in spray can. Gray Seer, which is a cooler, darker gray. It's not dark in the realm of gray by any means, but compared to Wraithbone, it's a darker color. So it's a cooler color. It's going to give a cooler, darker effect to the contrast paints, but it's a light gray. Let's be real. Wraithbone is an off-white. Now, what's important to note, they say this in the video for contrast paints on CitadelColor.com, the contrast paints won't work over a dark base coat. So it's good to know that. Now, when they first talked about these base coat colors before we knew their name, necessarily, we might have at the time, I don't remember, I was wondering if it was purely going to be offered in a spray can style, because the whole point when they showcased contrast paint so that you can paint an army up quicker. And part of the quickness is spray basing your models. So it made sense why it's in a spray can form, but they did showcase it in paint pot form as a base paint, Gray Seer and Wraithbone. Now they say it's for doing any touch-ups. Once you spray base, you always have to touch up a little bit after that, which is true. What they're not saying, and what is implied when you read between the lines, if you so desire to, is that you can base coat your models by hand with these paints, also with the paint pots, or use an airbrush if you have one, or whatever. So as long as you have a color close to Gray Seer or close to Wraithbone, it should still work. So you even have to get these colors if you happen to have something close enough already. So that's also good. That's an assumption, but there's a lot of weight behind that assumption, so I think it'll be fine. Now, we've seen all of their paints offered for the range of contrast paints at the Warhammer Fest posting on the Warhammer community page. But to hear it called out in number, or read it as 34, and they say at launch, is cool. Now, calling it at launch leaves it open-ended to both be added to and unfortunately potentially taken away from. But hopefully it just means over time they'll add. Now, 34 is a lot of different contrast paints. That's a lot of different shades of the same color, which is a good thing, because mixing paints up all the time to get a certain hue isn't always the most effective thing. So I'm looking forward to their range, like I said already, but 34 is a lot, especially for something so different. They could have started off with 12 and then added to it later, but they're hitting us with 34, which is a pretty comprehensive range. So chances are there's going to be a color that should interest you if you so desire to give them a try. Now, that's all well and good, and they're designed to do things, like we know, to paint up an army quickly. They also make mention of doing flesh tones, skin tones, and obviously the big one to think about is orc flesh. Getting a green, because there's multiple greens, so choosing the correct green for your orc's flesh tones is going to be invaluable to making the process of painting up your orc wa less painful. Let's be honest. So that's pretty cool for sure. Anything that's going to do skeletal bones well, chances are they're going to work out well for a Deathwing as well. Just food for thought. Now, they also make mention of how their white contrast paint is very interesting, because there's no such thing as dark white when it comes to shading it. So what they did is they formulated it, and I'm curious how well this works out in person, is they formulated it to be a subtle blue shade to it in the recesses. So, pretty interesting. They also have a gray that they showcase as a way to do a metal that's a non-metallic finish. Now, I say it that way because non-metallic metal has certain connotations and a certain painting style, and it's not going to be achieved by one paint pot. But if the model has no other metal on it, and you have a gray, in the case of this one, since we're not talking gold, we're talking iron here for this example, but you have a gray that, when all said and done, is saying, hey, check out this metallic model, and you're looking at it going, okay, then yeah, I get what they're getting at here. That's the best way I can describe it. And that immortal model, looking at it in person, well, not in person, on the internet, the picture, for all intents and purposes, because there's no other metallic to tell you otherwise, yeah, seems like a metalish finish for sure. So that's pretty cool. Now, one thing I did not expect to be announced was a contrast medium. Lamia Medium was actually a really cool thing to use and have. It works great with their paints and their washes and their glazes. But it's meant for the standard range of stuff. Contrast paints are formulated differently. And much like other paints that are non-acrylic or even other companies' acrylic paints have special formulations, water can mess with the formulation of a paint. That's 100% true. And they're claiming water will mess with the formulation of contrast paints, and I have no reason to truly doubt that based on how the contrast paints work. So, contrast medium is out there to let you thin your paint down to do things outside the normal intentions, such as like granite blue glazing to their armor, which actually works out really nicely. So, really cool to see this contrast medium come out. I wasn't expecting it, especially not at launch necessarily. So that was kind of out of nowhere and cool to see. Now they wrap things up by talking about different possibilities with the paint, and one of the people at Warner Community took Lead Belcher and Retributor, so that's silver and gold, and they put some contrast paint over that to give kind of like a metallized color. And the two models are Stormcast models, and they do look cool. It's a cool effect. I know for me personally, it's not going to replace doing how I do my Tisca Ruby effect for 1,000 Suns, which is to me a clear red over a gold, but still a cool effect nonetheless that you can get with contrast paints. You can also get those effects with glazes and washes and thin down paint, so whatever, but still cool. But with that said, it's just them further showcasing different ways to use the paint. Now I've been thinking from first announcement of different ways to use it on weaponry, such as maybe doing a power sword or force sword effect over. You could do the glazing effect over metallic like they did with the gray knight armor, or you could do the gray and white base coats together on the sword in such a patterning that when you put a contrast color over it, it kind of gives like a glowish feel for the force sword or the power sword or some other magical equipment, right? And doing something similarly for plasma coils and energy coils and the like, such as a plasma gun coil or as an energy tube for a las can or whatever, could be an interesting effect as well. So that will require, of course, experimentation and probably some dry brushing of like of some color or something, or a white or something after you're done, to really kind of make it pop for the plasma coil, for example. But I think there's a real there'll be a really interesting effect given the detail of the plasma coil with the Gray Seer and Wraithbone, maybe Gray Seer put in and Wraithbone dry brushed over that heavily, and then you put, let's just use blue as a classic plasma color in there, you maybe thin down with contrast medium or not, and then a gentle dry brush of white on the extreme edges can give a potentially cool plasma coil effect. So hey, you never know. It's just things to think about and experiment with once we get the paint. So cool stuff, although I do have one specific concern. I've had other concerns when I first heard about this paint, but over the course of time, and especially with that one meet the range post, all my other concerns went away, right? We have the base paint in pot form, or bottle, paint pot form. That's what I meant. In paint pot form, we see different ways in which the paint can be used right off the bat. There's a full range of color to choose from, all really cool stuff. But for everything they showcased, they have not shown it on a vehicle yet. Now, a Trigon, a Carnifex, some other big bug or big demon or whatever, it's going to work fine on. Those are organic shapes with detail on it in a way that the contrast paints are going to work out fine on. The issue, I feel, if there is going to be an issue, I feel is going to be with large flat armor panels such as Rhinos, Dreadnoughts, Land Raiders, Chimeras, maybe even you could say Tau and Eldar vehicles, which are a bit more organically curved, but still artificial shapes, if you will. So with that all being the case, my big wonder is, how is that going to work on these type of models? I will say this. GW made these paints, right? Formulated these paints. They worked on these paints specifically for their paint range or their model range. I have no doubt they have vehicles and stuff in mind. So at the end of the day, it's probably going to work out fine. But because we haven't seen it yet, that is why I still have that concern, because we just haven't seen anything in regards to vehicles and contrast paints. It should work out. I don't foresee a real problem with it. It's not as thin as shades, so I think it should stick and do just fine. But the proof is in the pudding, as they say, and you'll have to see it when it comes out and people start doing it and we try it ourselves. So I guess that is just the one concern that I have. Possibly other people share that concern. I don't know. I'm guessing. But I don't necessarily think it's a deal breaker, because it's not like this is a third-party paint that didn't have Land Raiders and Chimeras and Baneblades and stuff, and Titans even and stuff in mind. So I am not ranking it as high as a concern, because GW, I think, is smart enough as a company, and definitely should be, to keep their full range of models in mind for these paints. And I hope that's true, because the last thing you want to do is go ahead and get a really nice yellow, green, red, whatever color you're doing for your infantry, your Space Marines, let's say, your Chaos Space Marines, whatever, to get the main armor color looking good with an effect that you're happy with contrast paints and building off of it. Maybe even not just leaving it alone, maybe building off of that contrast base coat. But whatever the case is, you don't want to then go to a vehicle, have to bust out a different paint that is close enough to your green or your red or your blue, but not 100%, because you'll know it's not 100% when they're sitting side by side and you stare at it long enough, it might become evident. It might be really close, almost too close to tell, but why play that game and take that risk? So that's my only reason why it's a concern of mine. But I've drawn on that long enough. I'm sure we'll see examples of that, if it's not already on the internet, of vehicles painted with the contrast paint method, and I'm sure it'll be fine. So we'll just have to wait and see. But that's really the only concern I have. Other stuff that I had as concerns, I can't remember all of them, because, well, they've been answered and addressed. So with that said, rambled on long enough, as I tend to do. If you made it this far, welcome. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, you definitely earn the right to do so, I guess. You could say it that way, because this isn't a scary way, so welcome on board. Anyways, share your thoughts on both the Citadel Color website. If you've visited it before, what do you think? Are you looking forward to see them add to it? I think it'll be a great resource. And what is your thought on the contrast paint range coming? Are you somebody who has raised your pitchfork already against it, as people tend to do? Are you somebody that is curious to give it a try? What are your potential concerns? What color are you most looking forward to trying? Share it all in the comment section below. Anyway, thanks very much for stopping by, and until next time, take it easy.